Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all the dignitaries of the dais. Um, I represent a company called First Solar. As a very quick introduction, we are into manufacturing of solar panels, and we also invest in solar power plants, both for the for utility scale projects for supply to government utilities, and we are very closely evaluating right now investing in power plants to supply to consumers, private consumers under open access. Coincidentally, we very recently did a study, particularly for the state of Maharashtra, in terms of evaluating the economic viability of doing these open access transactions. So when you look at it at a very macro level, open access makes complete sense for a generator. As a generator, we think today the variable price of the energy in Maharashtra is about 7 rupees. As most of you might have heard, solar can produce electricity today at about 5.5 rupees as well. So you think, this is clearly a market for you to target as a generator. But as you go into one more level of detail, you realize that you have to deal with the cross-subsidy surcharges, all the open access charges. While you do that, you have this discussion with the customer also. We have had these discussions with a few customers, right? Okay, so taking just a step back, sorry, and setting up the context, from the morning session, I realized that a lot of open access is being discussed in the context of power trade on short-term basis. However, for a renewable generator, particularly like us, we are not looking for short-term open access arrangements. We would set up dedicated power plants on captive basis for a specific set of customers or a particular customer. And hence it becomes very important to have a long-term PPA over a period of 20, 25 years to make the project viable. Correct? So, and when you start discussing this with the customer, you make the first pitch saying that today your cost of energy is 7 and we can supply at 5. It sounds very rosy, but then the customer tells that he wants the generator to bear all the open access charges. And the generator, as a generator, we say that, the open access charges have to be borne by you. We can supply the power at the bus bar tariff. And this is where a lot of transactions, at least for us, we have not been able to succeed. Because the uncertainty which lies in this open access charges is so varied that it is almost impossible to predict how will it change over the course of this longer period of 25 years. Right? So if you have seen in Maharashtra, in 2013 and 14, I think the open access, the charges, which includes the wheeling charges and losses, they had reduced. But in the last year, they have again gone up. Right? So this variability in charges, plus now the proposal of levying the additional surcharge, which at least at a proposal stage by MSEDCL to include even on captive or group captive consumers, these are essentially the uncertainties which make the transaction extremely difficult to execute, not only just as an investor, but almost impossible to get, to make it bankable. No banker would be willing to fund the projects where there is so much of uncertainty on the investment or the charges that you will eventually get. As long as the tariff differences are wide enough and somebody is willing to consume that, these transactions may go through, or in short-term open access is where you know what is the charges today and you factor that in your calculations, the transactions are viable. But as soon as the period is of longer duration, these transactions are extremely difficult to execute. So this in our view is one of the most important hurdles in terms of having open access or executing open access transactions. Having said that, there has been, the recent policies, particularly in Maharashtra on the open access regulation. A lot of positives have come from that in terms of making the, until 2 years back or 3 years back, maybe it was not even, getting open access on long-term basis in Maharashtra was extremely difficult. But with this policy, and it seems that it is possible to do these transactions, at least from a regulatory standpoint, apart from the commercial issue which I mentioned earlier. But however, I would like to mention here that one of the restriction that has come with this policy is based on the contract demand. I think someone in the morning also raised that if a customer has a contract demand, let's say of 10 megawatts, the open access transaction that you can do with that customer is limited to then 10 megawatts. Right? What does that mean for a solar generator is that, as we know, the solar works at about 19-20% PLF. Right? So the maximum plant capacity that you can put is 10 megawatts, and therefore, effectively, the customer gets barely 2 megawatts out of the solar or the renewable energy source. Right? So, I think I wish, or I can make that request that, in subsequent version of these regulations, something can be done about this, because this kind of severely restricts the open access transaction that can be done with a customer. And what it does is that it's not just about the quantity. Actually, the customer kind of loses interest also when he sees that very small portion of his capacity can actually be converted into open access. The other challenge that we have faced is that as per the provisions or the way the tariffs are calculated for a customer consuming more than 80% in energy terms of their contracted demand has several incentives. And their tariff is actually much lower than a consumer, for example, who is consuming 70% of the energy in terms of PLF terms. So we have a situation where one consumer is kind of at 7 rupees is the variable energy tariff, but he's effectively paying probably less than 6 rupees because of the exemptions or the rebates that he gets in the tariff while consuming higher PLF. And so from a generator standpoint, it becomes difficult for us when we have to target these customers. You do not know how do you really reach out to these customers, because you don't know who is consuming what energy. This data is not really available. So you kind of spend a lot of time and energy in identifying the customer, and then you realize that, they are actually, their energy numbers or tariffs are not 7, but really 6 rupees. And it therefore becomes even more difficult to close that transaction. So these are some of the issues that we have faced, in trying to work through open access in the state of Maharashtra. And I don't know what is the really answer, particularly based on the today morning conversation. It seems it's going to be a while before these kind of issues are addressed. So that's it from me. Thank you.